to my town hall meeting this evening on the City of Toronto budget. I'm joined by my colleague, Councillor Shelley Carroll, who is also Budget Chair, Budget Chief, Councillor Shelley Carroll, and by Stephen Conforti, who is the city's Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer. So we've got a full evening with lots to discuss, so I'm going to get things underway. So first, I would like to begin with the Indigenous land acknowledgement. The land I'm standing on today is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty Number 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. And I'd also like to read the African ancestral acknowledgement that we use at Toronto City Council. And it says that the City of Toronto acknowledges all treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade, and slavery. We pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. And once again, I want to thank everybody for joining the webinar tonight on the City of Toronto's 2024 budget discussions. You can find all of the 2024 budget information on the City of Toronto website and posted links in the meeting comment section of the town hall tonight, as well as on my website at www.paulainslie.com. We had our budget launch yesterday, so I'm sure that many of you have heard it does have a proposed property tax increase of 10.5%, or possibly as high as 16.5% if we can't get the federal government to come to the table to support us financially. But there will be more of that in the presentation and the question and answer. The 10.5%, it really breaks down to a 9% of the increases to support the operating budget. This includes items such as solid waste collection, snow removal, road works, safety installations, traffic lights, crosswalks, sidewalks, parks, maintenance, grass cutting, libraries, police, and emergency services. And then we have a 1.5% increase for the city building levy. In a previous life, that was called the Scarborough Subway Fund, but it's an infrastructure fund now. And then the additional 6% that I referred to, we're looking from federal funding for shelters and refugees. Some of this I've spoken about before, and in my newsletters, we'll be touching on that again. This 6% actually works out to about $250 million of funding that we're looking at the federal government to provide. We don't have that in hand yet. We have not received a commitment for it, but we've included that as an expense in our budget. The budget includes a number of things, $620 million in reductions and offsets that Stephen will be talking about. We've looked at some service reductions, and then, we need more funding because we have inflationary costs in our budgets of about $623 million, or 35% of our budget. Transit for such things as buses, security, better service. We have sustained pandemic costs. We have a budget shortfall because of Provincial Bill 23 that's reducing the development charges that the City of Toronto has been entitled to. We just have a new deal with the provincial government over includes picking up costs of the Gardiner Expressway and the Don Valley Parkway, which is about $1.9 billion that the city is going to be reimbursed for. We don't have that money in hand yet, so that's also a cost. I am happy we do have a number of new additions to the city's, Ward 24 through the budget. We have a new skateboard park coming to Confederation Park, a new splash pad in Scarborough Village, a new park coming to Markham and Eglinton, Cornell Park seeing some new lighting. The Gill Park and Gardens is going to see the Osterhout log cabin revitalized. There's some additions coming to the Cedar Ridge Studio and Creative Center. There's lots more that you can learn about that's going to benefit Ward 24 in the budget. If you want to look at my website, or if you receive my email newsletter. So that's kind of my brief introduction. We are going to be having a presentation and then a question and answer session. And Mayor Chow does have a previous commitment this evening, but she said she'd do her best to join us for the question and answer session. She really wants to hear from the residents in Ward 24 about what their budget priorities are. And then I guess my last bit before I do introduce Councillor Carroll is just to remind and reinforce with everybody that, you know, budget is still a work in progress. There's still public consultations to be done. We want to hear from the public and continue to hear from the public about what your priorities are, what you'd like to see in the budget, what you're not happy about in the budget. And then the final budget it's not finalized until February. There's a committee process at the budget committee to be done. So what you heard yesterday isn't the final budget. It's still very much a work in progress. And at this point, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Councillor Shelley Carroll, who's the City of Toronto Budget Chief. Welcome, Councillor Carroll. Take it away. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Paul, and hello, and hello to your staff too. Paul and I have both been hanging around City Hall for about the same amount of time, and so we know each other's teams real well too. I'm really looking forward to hearing from people in your ward tonight, and I am very much looking forward to introducing your attendees to our new Chief Financial Officer. I know that a handful of people from Paul's ward attended our pre-budget consultation up at Scarborough Civic Centre, and we were really happy. It was one of the best turnouts we had in the whole 16 different meetings that we had during pre-budget consultation, and Scarborough was one of the best turnouts. And so it was really exciting to see that right off the bat. And a lot of people said, what are we doing here? Just tell me what the budget is. And now you do have the budget in front of you. And I know it's a tough pill to swallow. We know that. But we went a long way in terms of that pre-budget consultation process that we went through. We went a long way towards describing to people what the city's challenges have been, what we've been facing for a long time, and particularly as a result of COVID. You know, we've always had a structural challenge to the city's financial formula since amalgamating with all the other cities, but that structural problem that we've had for a long time really came into sharp focus when we were going through COVID and suddenly had deep crises such as, you know, losing all the riders from the transit system and yet needing to continue to run that system. Those are hard things to do when you don't have the financial structure that can support it in different ways other than just property tax. We're very limited in the City of Toronto, and that's part of the reason we find ourselves where we are. So what you heard yesterday, and really I guess the starting points that I can leave you with, and then you can hear real detail from Stephen Conforti, our CFO, are things to remember are that, you know, this is a budget that really started with a deep financial shortfall because we were starting from a place of still carrying forward the expenses that were left with the city from COVID-19. The ridership drop we see as a COVID expense because it took away $1 billion in revenues right off the bat, and the additional expenses of additional services needed during COVID. The same time, you know, well, hey, you closed down my hockey rink and things like that. We did reserve those funds and try to use them for places where we needed to plug in financially and keep things afloat. But those funds are now dwindling as well. We've used the last of them to balance this budget. And what we want now is to be able to say, look, we have to do this truing up of the books and this righting the ship so that we can secure our future. But at the same time, there are much needed investments part of the wonderful new provincial New Deal that the mayor and Premier Ford and the city manager and CFO were able to negotiate is the reason we're able to, even in hard times, make an investment in transit. We heard in Scarborough and every other place we did pre-consultations, I need transit to be safer and more reliable. I'm not coming back to work until it is. And the Premier was hearing that at the same time. And so you see that kind of investment in this budget and some others that are much needed. Basically, it boils down to this. We heard over and over again from folks that they want a safe and reliable transit system. They want us to get moving and much faster on affordable housing. And we're doing our best there with help. And they also want to see us repairing and working on capital. And lastly, they just want the community to be safer. And so, you know, you're going to hear us, you know, arguing over the numbers, but there is an increased investment in the police budget in this staff proposed budget. As well, we're making an investment in what we call the Toronto Community Crisis Service, which is an attempt to take some of the burden of mental health and mental wellness off the police services so that they can focus on the real policing tasks we need them to be doing. Part of Paul's ward is where that pilot of the Toronto Community Crisis Service has been carried out by a great Scarborough agency, Taibu, and it's gone very, very well. And so we're going to invest the dollars this year to take that citywide. And so a lot of the calls that will come into 911 saying, you know, my mentally ill dad, I don't know if he's taking his meds. We had a very troubling call, but we're afraid to go over. Well, the 911 can now take the history and decide if it's safe. We'll just send TCCS instead of the police. Imagine that happening thousands of times across the city. So there's more than one way to allow the police to make us more safer in our communities. And one of those is this other service. We're starting to call it the fourth emergency service. But there's investments like that in this budget made possible by the tightening of our belt of 600 million plus in efficiencies and from that provincial New Deal. What you'll hear at the end of Stephen's presentation is the thing that I really want you to take away tonight. We are still left doing all of that responsible financial managing. We're still left with one very serious outstanding item, and that is we desperately need the federal government to come forward to meet their responsibility. Their policy and their actions have made it such that we have a lot of asylum seekers and refugee claimants starting to overwhelm our shelter system. 500 is manageable for us. We now have almost 6,000, 5,800. We need that program to be funded by the federal government. That is their responsibility, and those talks are ongoing, and we really need that to come through. If this, as Paul calls it, a work in progress, but if we want to see any changes to this budget, that has to happen between now and the end of January. But you'll hear more of the detail of that in Stephen's presentation. And with that, I'm here all night for the questions, Paul, but I'm happy to have you introduce our Chief Financial Officer.
All right. Thank you very much, Shelley. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce Stephen Conforti, our Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer. He's going to give us a budget presentation. After Stephen's presentation, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of either myself, Shelley, or Stephen. I'll go over the dynamics of being able to ask the question and what you have to do. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Stephen. All yours, Stephen. Welcome to Ward 24. I think, again, you were here as a budget analyst.
I have supported your ward's town halls for many years, and it's actually it's always a privilege, and I enjoy doing it.
Yeah, so I have to say welcome back.
Welcome back. And good evening, everyone. Before I start, I actually want to thank Councillor Ainslie and his staff for organizing this town hall in the 2024 budget. You have the distinct privilege of being the very first town hall post-budget launch this year. So that's fantastic. And I really want to thank everyone for attending, and even more so for your interest and participation in the city's budget process. As Councillor Ainslie noted, I'm Steve Conforti. I'm the Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer here at the City of Toronto, and I'll take you through this year's budget launch presentation. Sorry, Councillor, do you have your hand up? Nope, never mind. All right. So if we can go to the next slide, please.
Practicing.
So to say that developing the 2024 budget was a challenge really would be an understatement. That said, I can say that staff prepared the budget, a budget that truly does get the city back on track towards financial sustainability, especially as we manage significant and unprecedented financial challenges. So I'll get into it in a little more detail, both in operating and capital sections, but this slide just gives you a quick highlight. We've got a 2024 operating budget of $17 billion in total expenditures. We have a 10-year capital plan of nearly $50 billion in total expenditures. As we developed the staff prepared budget, there were some key factors that help inform the work that we did. The first being the long-term financial plan that we presented late last summer that really detailed the financial challenges the city was facing over the next 10 years, as well as received council authority to be able to implement certain actions that will help towards mitigating some of those challenges. The budget was also very much informed by the fall budget consultations that we had. I'll talk about those as well, but we essentially had 16 sessions across the city, and we're able to hear, even through our online surveys, close to 11,000 residents, which was fantastic and great input in developing the budget. Obviously, and like Councillor Ainslie had noted, the budget was very much influenced by the Ontario-Toronto New Deal agreement that we reached. It was a great experience actually to be part of those discussions, and really have to give the province credit. They came to the table, they were ready to listen and understand the challenges that Toronto was facing, and work collectively towards opportunities to address some of those challenges in a way that not just benefited the city, but benefited both the province and the nation. And obviously, like every year, the budget was influenced by our internal budget reviews and the preparation work that we do that really starts in earnest in June or so, as we undertake significant work to get us to this point. When we developed the budget, we developed it with one of the core principles of maintaining core services and service levels. A lot of the actions that we've taken this year and the strategies that we've taken have all been around looking at preserving and maintaining services and service levels here in the city. The budget also makes key investments in transit, affordable housing, and making Toronto safer. And I'll get into that in a little bit of detail as well. And like Councillor Ainslie noted, we have presented an operating budget that's supported by a 9% residential property tax increase. Again, I'll discuss what that means to the average resident, and really the challenges we were facing this year, which brought us to that tough decision. We'll also talk about the City Building Fund and the impacts that has on the capital program as well when I get into the capital section. Next slide. So really, the intent of this slide is noting that as Toronto prospers, so do Ontario and Canada. So I won't spend too much slide, but really identify some of the benefits that the city provides to both the province and the nation, while also noting our unique financial challenges that we had forecast over the next 10 years as part of the long-term financial plan when we had reported last summer. Next slide. So when I delve into the operating section of the presentation, I'll explain each of these points a little bit more. But what this slide highlights is the unique financial challenges the city faces. The first is our traditional structural deficit, and happy to really explain what that means when we get to the question and answer period. But it's really that challenge the city faces every single year, in large part because of our limited revenue tools and our revenue options that don't grow with the economy. They don't grow with the demand that we see as a city. We also have a worsening financial environment. I think if you tap the next slide, you'll see a couple more items popping up. And this speaks to our worsening financial environment. And lastly, the unique challenges that we face as Canada's largest city, all of these culminating in the challenges that we face and we would look to address as part of this year's budget. Next slide. Next slide again, please. So we have prepared a 2024 combined tax and rate supported operating budget of $17 billion in total expenses. We've known for some time that 2024 was going to be a challenging budget. We had noted the looming significant pressure we were expecting to face for almost a year. In fact, when the 2024 program budget submissions were all collected, the final opening operating budget pressure totaled an unprecedented $1.776 billion. While we've had opening pressure similar or even greater to the nearly $1.8 billion pressure over the last few years, I note that this pressure is unprecedented because unlike the budgets during the pandemic, there's no remaining Safe Restart Agreement funding or further expectation of COVID support funding to cover our sustained pandemic-related impacts. One of the key pressures that we're facing in 2024, beyond our traditional structural deficit and our annual inflationary and growth-related pressures, is the need to transition costs to our property tax base associated with the remaining $578 million in sustained pandemic-related impacts on our transit and shelter services. To address a pressure of this magnitude, this nearly $1.8 billion, while aiming to maintain and preserve city services, we had to take a new approach to budgeting. And really this year, you'll see we took an enhanced multi-year approach to how we built this year's budget. This approach, which at its core is rooted in avoiding significant reductions to critical city services, looks to fully address our operating challenge over a 3-year period. We factored $620 million in reductions and offsets that we were able to find as part of this year's budget, coupled with new deal funding and the 9% residential property tax rate increase that I had mentioned. So all of that was factored in this budget. Also, for the 2024 budget, we factored bridging strategies. And in looking at those bridging strategies, and I'll discuss them a little further, it allowed us to really address this opening challenge, but in a way where we could allow other actions we were taking that would materialize over the next 3 years to fully transition, fully materialize in a way where we could spread that challenge over a longer period of time without the need to make any significant reductions in this year's budget. Also, for the 2024 budget, like I mentioned, we had an opportunity to hear from the public prior to our budget launch. We heard from our residents as part of 16 budget consultations and garnered over 10,800 responses to our online budget survey. Through these consultations, we heard from our residents that they would most support added investments in affordable housing and shelter services, transit services, and making Toronto safer. And while the budget primarily aims to maintain and preserve services, we have made critical new investments totaling $152 million in these areas most valued by our residents. Next slide. So just to set context, today we're presenting an operating budget of $17 billion. This includes $14.9 billion or 88% of the overall budget for our tax supported programs and $2.1 billion for our rate supported programs, which include Toronto Water, Solid Waste, and the Toronto Parking Authority. Next slide. So this slide shows the total gross expenditures and net budgets for 2024 with the full length of the bar depicting the total spend for 2024, or what we call the gross expenditure, and the yellow bar representing the amount of property tax funding dedicated to deliver these services. It also highlights in the lighter color the nearly $600 million in sustained COVID impacts within shelter and transit services, reflecting added demands for our shelter services and reduced transit ridership that is only expected to return to about 80% of our pre-pandemic experience by the end of 2024. As reflected in this table, we continue to spend a significant amount on the costs, the city's cost-shared social programs, with a total spend of $4.75 billion in 2024. This includes programs which receive contributions from other orders of government that we deliver really in a shared approach with the federal and provincial government. And this includes Toronto Employment and Social Services, Children's Services, Shelter Support, Housing, and Toronto Community Housing. It also includes long-term care and public health. And it's why you see a much smaller yellow graphic in there, which shows that with that significant investment, less of it is actually funded from the city's property tax base. The next major areas of spending are in transit, as you see here, our rate programs that have no reliance on the property tax base, the police service, and then you can see the other areas that we spend on. Next slide. So we've shown this slide over the last few years, and those of you that have participated in prior year town halls probably recognize a version of this, and it captures the historical opening budget pressures the city has faced on an annual basis. What's important about this slide is in 2024 is that while the nearly $1.8 billion pressure isn't as significant as the pressures we faced during the pandemic, the key difference is there's no longer any expected COVID support funding included in our budget. We're now at the stage post-pandemic where all the remaining sustained pandemic impacts, coupled with the very significant $1.2 billion in growth and inflationary impacts, will need to be fully addressed by our property tax base or other available city revenues. Given the magnitude of this opening pressure and to avoid otherwise necessary reductions to critical city services, we've introduced that multi-year strategy that I spoke to successfully transition these pressures, including the sustained COVID impacts, to be permanently funded within the city's budget. Next slide. So this slide is intended to really break down that opening pressure that I talked about. So we did start this year's process with an opening budget pressure of $1.776 billion. And why I spend so much time talking about this is the nature of city budgeting, where we can't run a deficit. We have to present a balanced budget. So what we do every year is we build a budget, is we identify what are those needs, what are those additional costs for us to be able to maintain and deliver our services, and then what actions do we take either on reducing expenditures or increasing revenues to close that gap and essentially ensure that we fully offset the pressure and are able to bring forward a balanced budget. What's important to note, and it's really striking when you look at this pressure, 65% of it is due to transit and shelter services demands. Sorry, not just demands, but costs. That includes the sustained impacts of the pandemic that I spoke to earlier. It's also base transit pressures and service enhancements. We're continuing to bring service back on the TTC. There was a service restoration that was announced in the fall, and what you're seeing here is the annualized cost of that. And even in the base pressures, TTC is not immune to the inflationary and cost escalation pressures we're seeing. Even just for vehicle parts, they're looking at increases in the tens of millions of dollars. I think it's close to $25 million just for added costs associated with parts on their vehicles. And then we also know about the increased demand for our shelter services. For 2024, we're planning on having 10,600 shelter beds, and that includes 4,800 beds expected to be used by refugee claimants, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. And then really beyond that 1.15 billion of the total pressure, the remaining 35% is across all of our other city divisions and agencies, everyone but transit and shelter. And that's the inflationary and growth and the demand pressures that those programs are facing heading into 2024. Next slide, please. So this is an updated version of a slide that we used as part of the budget consultation process and aims to provide a visual representation of the budget challenges we face in 2024. That large red tower that you see on the left of the graphic represents to scale the 2024 opening budget pressure of nearly $1.8 billion. That smaller green tower just to the right of it reflects the $42 million in annual revenue that is generated from every 1% residential property tax increase. So, and only to provide perspective, to fully offset a $1.8 billion pressure through a property tax change alone would require a 42% residential property tax increase. Now, the other tower you see on this slide represent the portion of property tax funding that supports the municipal services we provide in Toronto. This includes the portions above that bold red line that you see within TTC and shelter services. That represents the permanent funding towards the sustained pandemic impacts that we see in those areas. So looking at those towers, alternatively, if we were to approach the 2024 budget challenge, that $1.8 billion pressure, through program reductions alone, we could completely eliminate transit city service in the entire city. That includes all subway, streetcars, bus service, everything. We could even then completely eliminate all fire services and fire response in the city. And if we did both of those actions, we would still be $30 million short from being able to balance this budget, just to give you a scope of the size of the challenge we were facing this year. Next slide. So I'd now like to take you through the approach that we've actually taken to bring forward a balanced budget. To do so, and with that lens of a multi-year approach that I had mentioned earlier, we've taken 5 key balancing actions. First, and as we always do as part of the annual budget process, staff reviewed budget submissions and identified potential opportunities for offsets, efficiencies, and other revenue actions. This year, those actions total $620 million in offsets when factoring both $244 million in opportunities identified as part of budget submissions that came in this year, and a further $376 million in offsets identified post-submission. These actions include line-by-line program reviews across our salary line items, our non-salary, our materials, our supplies, across all of our budgets. What that looks at is, what is your historical spend in these items? We would track back as far as 5 years, then we would look at what our expectations were heading into 2024. We were able to find reductions and offsets in those areas. We also looked at user fees, inflationary user fee increases, revenue adjustments on other opportunities that we had them. And lastly, the budget includes $30 million in long-term financial plan approved actions, including new revenues from the graduated municipal land transfer tax rate on high value homes. And with these actions and the suite of actions as part of the long-term financial plan, we expect future benefits continue to be realized in both 2025 and 2026. Our second action includes multi-year bridging strategies, which are designed to be temporary measures to strategically manage the pressure we face over the next 3 years. This includes the full depletion of our remaining COVID backstop of $305 million and some other one-time or limited time actions. As these bridging strategies are reversed in 2025 and 2026, they're going to be replaced through other planned actions that will fully materialize over the next 3 years, predominantly those approved as part of the long-term financial plan. Third, our balancing actions factor the $382 million in New Deal funding, mostly related to transit and shelter services. Fourth, the 2024 budget incorporates $380 million in additional revenue generated from residential property rate increase of 9%. And lastly, we expect the availability of a federal funding program to offset city costs for refugee claimant response. The 2024 budget expects 4,300 shelter beds to be used for refugee claimants and asylum seekers at an initial cost estimate of $250 million. This represents additional costs beyond the 500 dedicated spaces that are already provided and funded by the city for refugee claimants in our annual base budget. I should note the $250 million in our current cost estimates is subject to change. And as we've seen over the last year, could easily fluctuate based on the actual demand for our shelter services. In short, the city expects access to federal funding programs in 2024 for reimbursement of refugee response costs. We're now in January of 2024, and we've had these discussions with the province for some time now. And in the absence of a federal funding commitment during this budget process, staff will need to report back to the special council meeting in February with actions required to maintain a balanced budget. I should note that the equivalent of an added 6% property tax increase would be required to support 4,300 shelter beds for refugee claimants at a cost of $250 million. Next slide. The 2024 budget incorporates the funds expected from the New Deal agreement with the province and really does support the city's multi-year strategy to achieve an enhanced level of financial sustainability by the end of 2026. The 2024 budget includes a total of $382 million in operating funding from the New Deal, including $75 million for operating costs associated with the provincially owned Eglinton Crosstown and Finch West LRT, $100 million to invest in subway and transit safety, recovery, and sustainable operations, $200 million for our base shelter and homelessness support, and to a lesser extent, $6.9 million in operating funding for the Gardiner Expressway, while the due diligence process is completed to upload it to the province. Next slide, please. In addition to the outcomes of the New Deal, this year's budget was heavily influenced by a series of new public consultation sessions held this past fall. Initiated by the mayor and our budget chair, the city hosted a month-long engagement campaign, including online survey and various consultation sessions for residents to participate in. In total, the city received over 10,800 responses to our budget survey. We received over 11,600 ideas and comments in 28 different languages. We also got to meet with 661 participants in 16 different sessions, including in-person and virtual options across the city. An additional 314 participants joined in at local meetings hosted by community organizations within Indigenous, Black, and equity-deserving communities. Next slide. Some of the key results from the consultation was that we received overwhelming support for increased investments in affordable housing and shelter services, with 37% of participants expressing support for investments in those areas. We also heard support for increased investments in transit and police services from 13% and 10% of participants respectively. Alternatively, we also heard from 43% of participants that the city should decrease investments in police service. 13% also felt we should decrease parking-related services. And lastly, 6% of participants felt we should decrease investments in both support for Toronto businesses and investments in arts and culture. Overall, though, the strongest message that we heard was that there was agreement that other orders of government should pay their fair share of funding for intergovernmental responsibilities. 85% of participants agreed that the province should pay their fair share, and 88% of participants agreed that the federal government should. Next slide. The 2024 budget includes additional spending of $152 million in new and enhanced initiatives in areas consistent with what we heard during public consultations. This includes $82 million in shelter and housing, including $31 million for the winter warming response plan, which is 729 new shelter beds due to the surge in demand and change in threshold for extreme cold weather alerts from -15 degrees to -5. It also includes $35 million for 450 new dedicated shelter beds for refugee claimants, which contributes to the overall 10,600 shelter beds projected in 2024. Over $30 million in transit services and climate sustainability initiatives. Includes $26 million to sustain the safety, security, and well-being program at the TTC, which ensures a safe, reliable service responsive to customer needs. We're also spending almost $20 million on new community initiatives. Includes almost $17 million to increase direct nursing hours for residents at the city's long-term care homes, supported by provincial funding, and investing $2.5 million for the Toronto Public Library's open hours implementation plan, which will add additional hours throughout the week at a number of libraries, including expanding Sunday service to 8 additional branches. We're also investing $19 million in community safety initiatives, including almost $13 million to expand Toronto Community Crisis Service to be a 24/7 citywide service representing the 4th emergency service in Toronto. And like last year, we continue to invest more in the council-approved staffing plans for paramedic and fire services. These staffing plans total an additional $5.5 million in 2024, which will allow for hiring of 52 new firefighters and 62 new paramedics this year. In addition to those new investments, the 2024 budget makes considerable investments in existing services. I've already talked about the sustained COVID impacts. But again, we're transitioning $578 million in cost to our tax base. This includes $304 million in transit and $274 million for shelter services, which is critical to both set a sound financial footing and preserve these services in the post-pandemic environment. The 2024 budget also supports additional base budget investments in areas, including a few things that I had previously mentioned: the full cost of enhanced transit service initiated last fall, operating 2 new transit lines, Line 5 and Line 6, scheduled to open this year, expand the city's shelter system to a total of 10,600 beds, and makes additional city funded investment Toronto Community Housing Corporation, with total city funding and TCHC increasing to $346 million. Together, these new and base budget investments result in enhanced funding for shelter, housing, transit, and safety, all key areas we heard support for during the consultations. Next slide. I'll reiterate that the 2024 budget incorporates a residential property tax rate increase of 9%. This equates to an annual increase of $321 for the average home, which has an assessed value of just under $700,000, or the equivalent of a $26.75 monthly increase. The budget reflects an increase of 4.5% for multi-residential properties, half of the residential rate, 9% for industrial properties, and 4.5% for commercial properties. Since 2022, the city has maintained a small business property tax subclass, which provides a 15% rate reduction for eligible properties. This program currently benefits over 29,600 small properties. The city also maintains property tax relief programs, including the tax increase deferral program and the tax increase cancellation programs. In 2023, these benefited over 8,600 households, and since 2015 has provided $36 million in tax relief. The budget also confirms 3% rate increases for both Toronto Water and Solid Waste, and that's consistent with the interim rates that were approved in December. Next slide. So we'll move over to the capital budget. The 10-year capital plan totals nearly $50 billion, with $4.6 billion in spending in 2024 alone. The capital plan is balanced while maintaining the use of non-debt financing strategies. We anticipate new intergovernmental funding as reflected in the New Deal. The capital plan leverages growth-related funding tools for eligible investments, and it maintains our debt service ratio under 15% for all years within our 10-year planning period. The capital budget includes a 1.5% increase to the city building fund levy, which will be leveraged to support critical investments in transit and housing. Like previous years, this year's budget continues to enhance our climate focus in the capital planning process. The 10-year plan includes climate mitigation and adaptation actions aimed at reducing almost 75,000 tons of CO2 emissions. And we'll continue to have great success with our sustainable debenture program, with the issuance of both green and social bonds to finance capital infrastructure. The 10-year capital plan continues to prioritize investments in critical state of good repair requirements, with 52% of planned spending, or $26 billion, dedicated to SOGR investments. This includes an increase of $1.8 billion over the 2023 capital plan. State of good repair investments will continue to be a key focus for the city and a critical capital component as we advance towards long-term financial sustainability. Next slide. So just briefly, we have the 10-year capital plan of nearly $50 billion. 32 billion, or 64%, is for our tax-supported programs, and 17.8 billion, or 36%, for our rate-supported programs, which I noted before: Toronto Water, Solid Waste, and the Parking Authority. Of this amount, Toronto Water represents $16 billion in total spending over the 10-year period, and actually reflects our single largest area of capital investment in the city. Next slide. So I won't go through this in too much detail, but it just identifies how we fund that $50 billion capital program. Nearly $15 billion, or 29%, is funded from our water rates, and that's consistent with the level of spend that we have in our water program. Almost just over 14 billion, or 28%, is coming from various debt tools that we have. About 6.6 billion is our traditional debt. Nearly 5.5 billion is funded from our city building fund supported debt. And then we've got almost 2 billion that's funded from recoverable debt. And that's based on capital initiatives that can generate a revenue that can then service the principal and interest payments associated with that debt. We have 5.6 billion in development charge funding. I will note that beginning in this budget, we have started to take initial reductions to our expected level of development charge funding as a result of the Bill 23 audit. We do continue to work with the province and discuss with them options and opportunities to maintain the city and keep the city whole, consistent with their commitment a year ago. and offset the impacts associated with Bill 23 on city's ability to collect development charge revenue. Next slide. And this slide shows where we spend that $50 billion in capital. And again, you see Toronto Water represents our single largest area of spend. Transit is the next largest area and the largest that's actually supported through the property tax base at $13 billion. Within our housing programs, it's interesting. Our total investment's $8.5 billion. That's made up of two components: $3.2 billion of direct funding, and then we also have $5.3 billion in what we call foregone revenue, and that's either land incentive or land value that we provide for housing, or financial incentives in the form of reduced development charges, reduced property taxes, and things of that nature to support the development of affordable housing. And if you look down the list, $5.7 billion in transportation services, $4.3 billion in environment and recreation. That's predominantly our Parks, Forest, and Recreation budget. It also includes our Waterfront Toronto budget, our environment and energy budget, and even our TRCA budget. Next slide. We talked about the New Deal in the operating budget. There's also significant components of New Deal funding or relief within the capital budget. So as part of the New Deal, we are looking at the upload of the Gardiner and the Don Valley Parkway. The province is undertaking a due diligence process. As of right now, we've built the budget with the Gardiner still in the city's budget, but it's in there funded from the province. Upon the completion of the due diligence process, we will actually remove it completely from our budget and that associated funding. And what that does is it allows us to free up funding that we had otherwise committed to the Gardiner for critical infrastructure renewal projects and key infrastructure projects here in the city. The budget also, or the New Deal also includes $758 million from the province for the purchase of 55 new subway trains to replace those in Line 2. That is conditional on matching funding from the federal government. We're continuing to have discussions with the federal government and hope that we will see at the latest, when they release their budget this year, a commitment to $758 million in funding for the new subway trains, at which time we can then go and procure those trains. The budget also confirms the 3-year allocation of the Building Faster Fund that's supported based on Toronto exceeding our annual housing targets. Next slide. Excuse me. As endorsed last year in 2023, there is an incremental increase in the city building fund levy of 1.5% this year, which will result in an annual increase of $53 for the average home, or the equivalent of $4.42 each month. The city building fund levy is specifically dedicated to supporting transit and housing investments in the capital plan. With the continued growth of the city's capital plan, the city building fund remains critical in supporting these priority investments. In 2024, the city building fund is expected to generate $315 million in revenue. To date, $967 million in investments have been made due to the city building fund. And as you heard me mention just previously, the city building fund will support an additional $5.5 billion in capital investments over this 10-year capital plan. This includes significant investments in transit, including the purchase of subway cars, buses, and Line 1 and 2 capacity enhancements. Next slide. Investments in state of good repair continue to be a capital priority. It reflects $26 billion, or 52% of all planned capital spending over the next 10 years. This reflects an increase of $1.8 billion, or 7% over what was identified in the 2023 capital plan. Significant investments are being made in critical areas, including continuation of strategic investments in water infrastructure. The city's investing a total of $1.6 billion towards SOGR and Toronto community housing building repairs. In addition, as part of the budget, there's added investments of $200 million to address state of good repair work for parks, forests, and recreation in order to mitigate service disruptions and prevent unplanned facility closures. Even with added investments, the city's SOGR backlog is expected to grow from $10.6 billion at the end of 2023 to $22.7 billion in 2033. This has been driven by significant cost escalation, in part due to high inflation and recent supply chain issues. Updated assessment of our infrastructure assets And really that traditional pressure we've always faced, which is our infrastructure is nearing the end of its useful life. We've got significant amount of infrastructure that was built in the 60s and 70s, and you're starting to see that. The city is committed to continuing to address growing state of good repair. Following the province's due diligence process, Gardner and DVP funding will be reallocated in support of infrastructure renewal. As mentioned in the long-term financial plan, staff will enhance capital prioritization framework, which will further prioritize capital investments. We'll continue to enhance our capital asset management planning with a report on non-core assets to come later this year. And lastly, the City Building Fund will continue to be used to mitigate transit and housing SOGR pressures. Next slide. So really, in conclusion, for decades, the City of Toronto was on a challenged financial path, which couldn't keep pace with the growing number of capital and operational pressures. As the economic engine of Ontario and Canada, the path we were on and the challenges we faced were truly unique to Toronto. Torontonians had stepped up to do all they could, but it was clear that we could not change direction alone or overnight. We're now on a new path that will enhance our future financial stability. We're embarking on a multi-year approach to address the city's financial challenges, which will incorporate both city-led initiatives to achieve budget reductions and offsets, and will apply new deal supports from the provincial government. Over the next 3 years, we'll continue to set the course for Toronto's future. This year's operating budget of $17 billion maintains core services and service levels while making key investments in transit, shelter, and community safety. A key component of this year's budget is the permanent transition of the sustained pandemic impacts into the city's tax base. We do expect access to a federal funding program for refugee claimant response and require the federal government to provide a firm funding commitment shortly. The 10-year capital plan of almost $50 billion continues to prioritize investments in state of good repair while making advancements in transit and housing. With a focus on affordability and capacity to deliver, the plan is achievable while staying within the debt service ratio of 15%. We're also proud of our climate focus, and we continue to advance during the capital planning process. Next slide. So this slide, just at a high level, walks you through the schedule. Like we had mentioned, we launched the budget yesterday on January 10th. Next week at Budget Committee, all of our city divisions and agencies will come in and they'll speak to their budgets and respond to questions from Budget Committee members. What's new this year, and it's going to be on January 16th and 18th as well in the evenings, we'll be hosting telephone town halls, and it's just an added opportunity for public engagement in this year's budget. And in addition to that, we will have our traditional opportunities for budget deputations that will happen on January 22nd and 23rd across the city. From there, we'll have our final wrap up at Budget Committee, where Budget Committee will have their final consideration of the staff prepared budget and submit their recommendations to the mayor, who will then prepare her proposed budget on February 1st, which will then be considered at the special council meeting on February 14th. And the next slide I'll wrap up with. We really do encourage people to get involved in the budget, and attending today is an amazing first step. Following from the fall budget consultation, there still are opportunities to hear feedback and input from residents and businesses. This includes the new telephone town halls I just mentioned, speaking to Budget Committee on January 22nd and 23rd, through written feedback to Budget Committee, or you can always contact your local councillor. So that's it for me. And happy to stay on and answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. It's very much appreciated. I very much appreciated the very wholesome and detailed presentation as always. And thank you for all of your ongoing hard work. So for now, for the question and answer session, just to go over a couple of guidelines about how to answer or ask a question. So if you could please raise your hand by clicking on the hand symbol on the bottom of the application. You'll find that along the bottom of the screen, or you can hover over your name and the attendees list on the right side of the application and click the hand symbol beside your name when it appears. For those of you that are joining by phone, if you can please dial *3 when your name will be added to the list as well. When your name is called, you'll be unmuted. And after you ask your question, you'll be muted again. So one of either myself, Councillor Carroll, or Stephen can provide an answer without any background noise. And once your question is asked, if you could please click the hand symbol or dial *3 again to be removed from the question queue. And there is an opportunity, or there is an ability to write out your question. We're just asking people to the best of their ability if they can raise their hand and ask their question verbally so that everybody can hear it and I'm not mispronouncing anything, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to open up the queue, and please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question. Don't be shy. Alex, I'm not seeing any hands. Oh.
Yeah, we just saw one that said somebody's hand was up. Someone named Yvonne.
Yeah, Yvonne, my
There you
hand is
go.
up.
There's the list.
Yvonne first?
Yep.
Okay. Yvonne is unmuted.
I don't know if this is true because I haven't done a deep dive into the budget. It's just information that was trending on our local residential Facebook page. So I don't know if this is true, but if it is true, I wanted to know more about the elimination of plowing of the windrows as a cost-cutting measure. And just to read what I had in my comment, if it is the case, my observation is that especially during a major snow event, this is essentially a pretty negligent act because you're blocking folks in their homes, potentially endangering folks who need health or transportation services and preventing access for emergency services, not to mention other access points. And so if this is true, I'm wondering if there could be a reallocation from non-essential areas, whether it's bike lanes, tourism, Toronto, there are lots of other, I'll call them core, but non-essential services that are also funded. And if we're in tough times where we need to make some tough decisions, we want to make sure that essential service remains intact. The other alternative or idea would be to only have it be a cost-cutting measures applicable when there is not a major snow event. And as a follow-up to this, especially if I'm wrong, are there any other similar essential services that are on the chopping block that you might be able to let us know about? Because I don't know where this level of granularity is actually provided publicly. I did the survey and I don't remember any questions related to snow plowing, just broad questions to services.
Yeah, not a problem, Yvonne. So what happens with the budget? And so windrow clearing is one of the services that the budget committee in conjunction with staff looked at eliminating. And, as I said earlier, it's the budget at this point. We're still taking in public feedback on what they consider of paramount importance to them through their property taxes. But the removal of the windrow service was one of those, was a service that the budget committee is considered removing as a cost-saving measure. I can tell you from, you're not alone. I've heard from a number of people in my ward that it's something that they want to see stay in place. I know it's something that went in place when the city amalgamated in 1997. Prior to that in Scarborough, we're responsible for clearing out our own windrows. Since then, I know it's a service that's very much appreciated by many people, in particular seniors. We had a lot of trouble with a new contractor in our area last winter. Windrows was a huge problem. And, for myself as a city councillor, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that service stays within the budget.
So Yvonne, if I can add to your answer, Paul?
Yep.
Because it is a perfect example of the process we have to go through now. And thank you so much for the question. It was tough news for I was one of the budget committee members. We break into teams, then we meet with each division. And transportation proposed windrow clearing because they, like every division, were asked to come up with efficiencies. And so that was one they proposed. And I can tell you, part of the reason that Stephen highlighted it yesterday in the opening presentation was we had a discussion. I said, you know, that's the only one that's so front line. We got to highlight it. We can't be hiding it and waiting for people to discover it, because we've got to discuss it as a community. That has to be something we hammer out over the next month. And you know, Paul's already said he does not want to vote for it. So we gotta land somewhere with this. But I will tell you this, when the division put it forward, we always say, what's your rationale for putting that controversial thing forward? And they said, well, you know, we know we're disappointing people with the way we do it. And I come from North York, where that service was invented and started about 20 years in advance of when it started to happen in Scarborough. And it's delivered quite differently than it was when it was first invented. So where I represent, we get complaints from people even after the windrow's cleared that it's not the way it was when Mel Lastman did it. So there's a whole lot of debate we can have about it, but we really have to put it before you, because it really would save dollars in a really guaranteeable way, because it's part of a contract. And so it's going to be up to the community to tell us how they feel about it. But if we put it back, I really appreciate you're saying, can we look at doing it? If we're going to put it back in the budget, can we put it back in a certain way? Some are even suggesting, could we even go back to the kind of thing like we used to have with the old non-government organization Four Seasons, delivering it on a pay-what-you-can basis. Those sorts of things are all being suggested. So the community dialogue's already starting. And if by the time we get to January 26th, that's when Budget Committee will wrap up its review of this staff proposed budget, then at that point, we really need to give the feedback we've heard from community and councillors. We need to give that advice to the mayor so that she can decide if this efficiency is included in her budget when she announces her version on February 1st.
Thanks, Shelley. The next hand I have up is Brenda W.
Brenda, you're unmuted.
Brenda? Sorry, Brenda W. Okay, Alex, the next one I have on the list is a phone number, but I can't see the full number. If you can unmute that one.
Yeah, it's 416282, right?
Yes. But can you see the phone number? I can't see the full number.
No, I see the first three digits, so it's 416282. Somebody who has that number.
That's me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
My name's Jameson, and I am 282-9725.
Okay.
I apologize that I did not get the material because my computer doesn't behave as current technology does, but I'd like to make about 2 points.
Sure.
The
Go ahead.
first one relates to this federal charge, if you will, for the 4,300 people. You know, I look at that and I say, I sure hope, and I expect you to say you do, recognize that things are not exactly simple out there right now. Everybody in this community, okay, is dealing with concerns that are causing increases in cost. I mean, look at the people who are going to restore their mortgages in the next year or two. Look at the level of inflation we're at right now. And then on top of that, okay, what you are suggesting is that we may be exposed to the cost of financing all of these people that have arrived in Toronto, not because we voted for it, but because it's a federal issue. And that totals another $6 billion or so on top of what otherwise would be a 9% budget. And I think you're going to get a pretty negative reaction to that, especially when I read in the Globe and Mail this morning that, and maybe this is a miscount or a misquote, but Shelley Carroll, okay, is quoted as saying that if she doesn't get the money by January 26, she will simply add 6 percentage points to the federal pact levy. In other words, the people in Toronto are going to keep paying because to some degree, the suggestion here is that we won't receive the money. And my suggestion is that I think we have to be a lot more forceful in that to try and make sure they understand that there are consequences. And my recommendation is that not saying that you're going to add a levy, but pointing out to the feds right now that the money is to be received by the 6th or the 26th of January, as you say, or we are going to stop paying those hotels. And they will have to pick it up, period, so that they know we're not kidding, because the way it's worded in the paper this morning, all they have to do is sit tight and we'll add it to the budgets for all of the people in Toronto, which is grossly unfair and not necessarily the way that it should be pointed out to the federal people. One thing should happen, and that is they start paying the bill. And if they don't, the second alternative is maybe they should be moving these folks to some place where we can spread the cost beyond just on Toronto, because I think that folks in our community are going to be pretty darn ticked off if they see a budget that is $9 billion followed by something that adds another big piece of cost at a time when they can't hardly afford to pay for their mortgages or the inflation is here. And the only other thing I would offer to you is related to some experience I had once with transit systems. I don't know if 5 or 6 includes Eglinton, but that thing has been underway for a long time, and it's well overdue. And I understand that the senior executive there is yet to say when he will complete the project. In the meantime, we must have something that is well built and capable of transporting people, but not all the way. Have we given any indication that perhaps what we should be doing is opening up the piece that's complete so that we can start providing a service on Eglinton that isn't there today, improve the revenues of the TTC through that, and also perhaps receive some credit for the tough time you have these days getting through the city with all of the construction is on. So I'll stop there and just basically say that I think you have to be darn careful about how you word that $17 billion. And I think you should basically take a firm stand right now and say, as of the 26th of January, the city is no longer paying, and see whether or not that gets you action, that waiting for them to make a decision has really delivered nothing so far.
Yeah. Did you want me to take that, Paul, or do you want to go at it?
You can have it first, Shelley.
We're all frustrated by the progress.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I spend a lot of time in Scarborough, and so it's really hard when we can see so much length of the crosstown so completed, looking so beautiful and ready to go, and yet we can't just open that section. You know, it's really unfortunate. Had the city completed Eglinton Crosstown, our plan was to start with the station at Yonge and Eglinton, because if you haven't got that piece that connects to line 1 ready to go, you can't open part of the system. You have to wait till the whole thing's complete. So initially the city was going to do that project and start at Yonge and Eglinton, because it's that's full of problems connecting up to a subway line and all the rest of it. Instead, the province took over the project, and their corporation, Metrolinx, decided to start at the opposite ends and move their way in. And at the last part, start the work at Yonge and Eglinton. So now here we are with finish lines on either side, but they have nowhere to go until that station opens up. And so they are struggling to finish it, but I can give you good news. I drove through that intersection just recently, heading up to North York Civic Center, and they've made a lot of progress just in the last month, closing roads. The cut and cover isn't still wide open there. So they're doing their level best to try and get it done, but I feel for them. But I do want to go back to the federal levy. You're right. We can't pay it. What I was explaining to the media yesterday was that we have to find that 250 if the feds don't come through, because this is not a case of the city manager and the CFO put it very well yesterday. Sometimes cities say, here's the thing we'd like to do. Will you fund it, to the other orders of government? This is, we've been delivering this all along. The spring, summer, and fall, our shelters have been filling up with a federal responsibility created by a federal policy. We are taking asylum seekers who need a lot of service to start their lives in Canada and serving them in our shelter system. And so the greatest thing you could do for Paul right now would be to phone John McKay. Honest to God, if you will all phone John McKay and say, this is crystal clear to me, this is a federal responsibility, you have to help Paul out, then the 6% is off the table, because we're delivering it now, we're clear about our costs, we know what we're doing. They need to meet their responsibility. And that's really, really important, because what the influx is not going to stop tomorrow. It's gradually continuing, and they've got to meet the responsibility. If they do, those people can much more quickly become people who live in Canada and fill jobs in Canada, some that we're having hard times filling. They can be great Canadians, but the federal government has to meet their responsibility to give those people a good start.
Yeah, and we ask you to call John McKay because John McKay not only is our member of federal parliament, he's also the caucus chair. So he, next to the members of cabinet, the caucus chair of the largest city in Canada, has the prime minister's ear. And the prime minister is going to be the one that tells the minister of finance to cut that check. And as Shelley said, you know, we do operate our own system of shelters. It came to us as a great surprise earlier this year when we found out the federal government was running shelters in downtown Toronto and a number of other locations that were filled, and they were directing people to our shelters. So not only were they running their own shelters at capacity, they were using ours and not paying for it at all. The cost of those shelters come out of our tax dollars. So, you know, we're working very hard trying to leverage that money out of the federal government. But if people can also call, email, if you see John McKay in the grocery store, because he always asks me what I want, and I tell him the same. I've been telling him the same thing since pre-COVID. Write us a check.
Tell me
COVID,
which grocery store.
Yeah, yeah. So if you see him, please ask him to write us a check. Next on the list, we're going to try Brenda W. again. Brenda, Alex, can you unmute Brenda?
Councillor Carroll, Stephen, and Councillor Ainslie, can everyone
Welcome,
hear me?
Brenda. I can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank all three of you, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Ainslie, and Mr. Conforti. Sorry if I got the pronunciation wrong. And of course, all the city staff that are there to assist you with all this. When I heard on the news yesterday that we could get a property tax increase of almost 16%, I not actually fell off my chair. So that was extremely scary. And I know we all have our sob stories, but my parents left me nothing but the house and the roof over my head. And I lost both my parents and my partner in the last 5 years. So this has not been easy for me at all. I have scrimped and saved every penny. I turn on one light in my house, that's it. I pay for bills instead of eating sometimes. But I am not going to sell my parents' house. But if you increase property taxes to 16%, I'll have no choice and I will be nowhere. So I really hope you people find money somewhere. I can take a small increase. 10% is going to be another big hit on me, but if it has to go to 16%, you'll have another homeless person in the shelter system, which you do not want because you don't have a system right now that can support us. But I did type questions into the Q&A section of the computer. I don't know if anyone could see it, but I did have a question because the media tends to throw terms around and they don't really use them right all the time. But can I just get clarity on from either Mr. Conforti or Councillor Carroll, what is the difference between the budget that was presented tonight and what they're calling the mayor's budget? If I can just get clarity on that first. And then Mr. Conforti, I just had a few questions about if you had considered any of the following revenue streams that I typed in. But if I can just get clarity on what the current budget, quote, budget is, and then what the, quote, mayor's budget is.
Sure, sure. And people are getting used to this. The calendar is very prescribed now. Paul may have explained this in some of his newsletters last year. Under the provincial legislation for big cities like ours now, the new strong mayor legislation, it's very prescriptive. Municipal budgets are delivered by the mayor and to council, and then council votes on it. And they have to be done by a certain time, and they have to be balanced. And so how we do it in Toronto, and there's a little flexibility on how you get to a mayor's budget, but the mayor does have to take ownership of the budget and then get council's vote on it. That's prescribed by the province. And so how we do it in Toronto is staff spend really a whole half a year going line by line and each division developing what they think they need and then presenting it to Stephen and the city manager. And Stephen gets to say, that's not good enough. Go back to the drawing board and get lean. That whole process happens. When we launched yesterday, that was the beginning of the budget committee's process. And what we will do is have presentations from every division so that every councillor beyond the budget committee can come, ask the questions they need to ask. If they need more information or they want to let us highlight for us that this is a problem for you, that will be the place to do it. And then in our final meeting, which will be January 26th, we will wrap up the budget by moving a number of motions that are our advice as a budget committee to the mayor. There will be motions saying this is our advice to Mayor Chow on the staff's budget submission. And then you will see her on February 1st do kind of what I did yesterday. She will appear before the media and say, this is my budget. And she can say one of two things. She can say, I like what I saw back there on January 10th and I'm endorsing that one. Or she can say, the federal government has responded and that's good news. This is what that changes in the budget you saw back in January. My new budget now looks like X, whatever that might be. And as you've said, people have said, can't you find something else? Well, that may come out of all of these consultations in January. So the mayor may make some changes to what we proposed yesterday, but what she announces on February 1st is what will go to council on Valentine's Day for a vote. We won't have a very romantic Valentine's Day, but we will try and do our best for you. But I just want to end by saying to Brenda, I've done some looking around. We have property tax increase hardship policies of various natures on the increase and even on cancellations for people who are really struggling. And our income markers to take part in that program are the highest in the GTA to try and meet the fact that we have high property values. So I know that Paul's team can help you look at whether or not you might qualify for that.
Yeah, and I'm glad, and Councillor Carroll, I'm glad you raised that. I was going to actually raise the exact same point, and absolutely look into those programs and see if you might qualify. And I'm looking at a question in here, which I believe would be your question, and And if it is, I have to compliment you because there are amazing ideas that we spent a lot of time working on as part of the long-term financial plan. And I'll walk through each of these that you're asking about. So increasing the parking rates at city-owned parking lots. So I had mentioned in my presentation that we'd come forward as part of the long-term financial plan. Staff brought forward a series of recommendations, and the intent of those recommendations is we've known for a while this was going to be a very challenging budget. We've also known longer term we've got incredible challenges on our capital portfolio. So we brought forward a series of recommendations, and council, I really have to compliment council, jumped on the issue, worked with staff, and provided support and direction as it related to implementing these actions. So I'll start with the first one you raised on parking rates. So we actually removed the cap that had existed on on-street parking rates, and the Toronto Parking Authority is now undertaking a comprehensive review across the city to reevaluate the rates, and that's expected at maturity to generate probably another $15 million in revenue, so that the city can benefit from. As it relates to parking lots itself, we've also been given direction to look at a commercial parking levy. So my team, as we speak, are undertaking some thorough analysis into that, and what that could look like, where you might apply that, what you might charge, who may be exempted. So considerable policy review that's happening right now as it relates to bringing something forward. And there's varying estimates in terms of how much that might generate. It really depends on how it's implemented, but could experience some substantial revenue growth if implemented. Increasing the hotel tax. So again, another great suggestion. Last year, as part of the budget, we actually increased our municipal accommodation tax. We increased it from 4% to 6%. And that was a pretty substantial increase. And actually, I believe it's the highest we have in Ontario, if not the country. This year's budget actually benefits from the annualized impact of that increase that happened last year. So we already do factor additional revenue based on that decision that we undertook. Another great idea, increasing the vacant home tax. So we did it. Council approved it. So we actually increased the vacant home tax. And with all the numbers in my head, Councillor Carroll, you're going to have to nod if I'm right. I think the 3% of assessed value is where we increased it to. And it takes a while. There's a bit of a lag in terms of being able to generate revenue, but that is now in place for 2024. So if you have a property that is vacant for more than 6 months in 2024, come 2025, you will be subject to that charge, and we will benefit from those revenues in 2025. I do have to note, and we made a point of talking about this when we brought the report forward to council a few months ago. While we will benefit from revenue, and we're going to reinvest that revenue in affordable housing initiatives, it's intended to be a policy tool, not a revenue tool. The intent of that is not to have vacant properties. Make sure those properties are made available. Make sure they're made available for the people that need housing in the city. That really is the intent, and was the intent of increasing the rate to 3% of the assessed value. We'll continue to review what the outcomes of that is as we see the vacancy rates next year, but I'm really hoping to see a drop from this year's experience. Selling artwork assets owned by the city. I do have to admit, I haven't seen or discussed that before. Definitely something we can take back with our economic and development and culture group. I will say the artwork we have, it's often used at exhibits. It's used for different periods. We're going to be entering Black History Month next month, and I know that there's an opportunity where some of that artwork is made available and provided in public spaces that celebrates Black artists. So there's things that we do like that in terms of how it's used, but an interesting thing to look at. And will the downtown office buildings owned by big developers also have property tax increases? Yes, they will. They will be subject to our commercial levy, which is about 2.5 times that of our operating taxes, our taxes for residential properties. The other thing that we're doing with our office towers is We had an
text them
incentive
till on.
program that was intended to, sorry, I think somebody, if they can put themselves on mute.
I think that might have been, sorry, Steven, maybe the mayor just called in. I'm not sure.
Oh,
Yes, the mayor
404.
just joined.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
sorry. Fantastic. Just responding to the last piece of this question, and the short answer is yes, office buildings will also be subject to a property tax increase. In fact, their rates are roughly 2.5 times greater than that of residential property owners. So there was quite a bit there, but all fantastic ideas.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Brenda, for those questions. Welcome, Mayor Chow. We're just in the midst of the question and answer session.
Got it. I'm listening.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Next on the list, I have Mike McKenzie. Alex, if you can unmute Mr. McKenzie, please.
Yeah, just a sec. Just see. Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
can hear you, Mr. McKenzie. Go ahead.
Thanks for the open mic. Greetings, everyone. Hello, Mayor Chow. Greetings. You know, for 2024,
Hello.
For 2024, I have to control the controllables, you know? Tax will go up, tax may not go up. I have to deal with it. But here's my contribution. Councillors should be looking at things outside the box and should also be receptive to new ideas, you know? Sometimes you have to spend money to make money. So here's my specialty. My specialty is potholes and infrastructure issues like lighting and down fencing in Scarborough Village. I've been an advocate for well over 20-something years, okay? So last Monday, I had to put on my high beam to navigate potholes in the plaza beside where I live, okay? So that means if I am navigating the potholes with light, that means the lighting in that plaza is not sufficient, okay? We had a number of other stuff in buildings in and around the area. So one of our residents, he fell due to a lack of response from MLS, a 2-year report, 2 years of pleading to fix these things. So what I'm saying is this, it was just uneven pavement, but when that resident fell, it cost us. They called 911. He was transported to a hospital, okay? The emergency rooms in hospitals are, you don't want to go there. And I've been going there because my mom is on her last leg. So I am very familiar with the hospitals and I'm very familiar with the emergency rooms, right? So when you ignore that pothole and somebody falls, they call 911, you spend more money, okay? Now here's another thing. TTC safety is in the news and should be in the news, but guess what? The riders shy away. So we can say if you spend money, improve safety, the ridership increases and revenue increases, okay? But safety is not just about TTC. Environmental factors contribute to crime. When a fence is down in my neighborhood, it gives the bad guys an opportunity to flee. It gives the bad guys an opportunity to hide. When lightings, when owners of, let's take one more minute. When this city and the folks in charge are not holding the property owners accountable in my neighborhood, you're not saving anything. You will be increasing our cost because crime will be going up, people will be falling, and in most of the households there's one income. So when that breadwinner twists the knee or the ankle, there goes the support. I'm not going to complain that my mortgage is about to double when I renew, that I can't afford food. I got to sometimes
Sorry, Mr. McKenzie.
I'm
Sorry,
done.
Mr. McKenzie, I don't mean to interrupt, but do you have
I'm
a
done.
question for one of us?
I'm done. No, I didn't have any questions. I'm making a point that everyone has to start thinking outside the box. Okay, I respect your budget, but what I'm saying is fare limits the ridership and TTC. So when you get rid of the fare, people will start taking it. And I'm saying in my community, when people ignore the environmental factors, people get hurt. People twist their knees. People call 911. So that the system now has to look after them. I will be writing every member of City Councillor by February the 16th, and I will meet and I will articulate these points more succinctly. Okay? Because
Okay, thank you, Mr. McKenzie.
you're most welcome, Councillor.
And thank you. I appreciated the neighborhood walk that we did last month. Next, I have Nancy Dinnigan. Alex, can you unmute Nancy Dinnigan, please?
Yeah, she's unmuted.
Nancy, can you hear us? Nancy Dinnigan?
Nope.
No. Okay, Alex, can we try Nick B?
Nick, yeah. Nick, go ahead.
Nick B?
Nope.
All right. And then I'm next on the list. I have, sorry, why don't we try Nancy Dinnigan again? And then I'm going to go up to Cheryl.
I think it looks like Nancy doesn't have audio, so let's just.
Okay. Can we go up to Cheryl?
Yep. Cheryl, go ahead.
Back in the words, I believe it was of Brenda, thanking everyone for putting this together. As a citizen of the city, I really, really appreciate the transparency, the effort that's gone into that, and the clarity and a lot of the detail that's come to us. As I said in my little typed up note, my soapbox is the environment and animals. I'm asking specifically about the hits that the TRCA might take, animal services might take, and frankly, any kind of beautification efforts for the city. And I guess my add-on to that would simply be, where do citizens step in to help where some of these services are going to be reduced? Or are there plans for that kind of stuff to be launched? Thank you so much.
Can I answer this one, Paul?
Yep.
I'm really glad you raised some of those types of services, and asked, will they take the hit? Because I think part of the problem, sometimes we hear people saying, oh, you never cut things, City of Toronto. You don't open the newspaper and see, oh, 600 people laid off. But in fact, over time, through the underfunding of municipalities, and in particular, the underfunding of the City of Toronto, that's what happens. Because we may still have animal services may sit up there on Progress Avenue, but when we say to them, absorb your inflation, you can't raise your budget this year, so you got to absorb whatever is happening in inflationary cost to your operations, and you got to stay within the budget you've had for the last 4 years. What happens is slowly that service does contract. They end up to meet yet another year of increased costs. They'll eventually start to shrink their staff, and so we'll say the service is still there, but the quality goes away. And so, we're really grateful to Mayor Chow. I'm glad you're on the line now, because I've wanted for a long time to go out and have the real conversation with people about what is this city you want before we draft the budget, so that we're not just talking about the number, we're talking about the services you want, you need. And you just named some of them, and addressing climate change to boot. Some people don't think of it as a service, but we're trying to do that across all of our services and infrastructure. But always saying, get it lower, get it lower, get it lower. Stephen puts pressure on every division, and they dutifully give him a lower cost budget, and they just gradually get able to do less and less. And that's what we're trying to do here by drawing a line under all the COVID expenses and trying to reduce the shortfall, striking that new deal with the province that you saw between the mayor and the premier, demanding a deal for our refugee challenge from the federal government. Getting all of that stuff balanced off is so that we take this bitter pill this year, and I get it. On the average household, it's $30 a month, and I'm going to have to come up with that for my average household, because I am about average when I looked at the stats. but we want to be able to start to get better. We want to be able to start to get back to the city we remember when it was better. And we really can't do that if we're constantly shrinking each thing just a little bit. And it's great that you're offering to volunteer, but it's not realistic to say we'll all just have to pitch in, because you'll pitch in, but certainly not everyone will. And so that's what we're really saying here. Let's true up the books, get rid of the COVID, and chart a good course of the future. That's what we heard people describing that they wanted in the pre-budget consultation. They said, one person said, and I've never forgot this, especially in hard times, I need the city to deliver. I rely on you. If I can't afford bells and whistles with private, then the city better deliver for me. And that's what this is about, making it able to do that. We asked staff to propose a budget that did that, and now that's what we're talking about. So thank you for highlighting those other types of services that seem off the beaten track, but you really value.
Thanks, Shelley. Next, so I'm going to try Nancy Dinnigan again. Alex, if you can try unmuting Nancy.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear, Nancy. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I don't know what happened last time.
Yeah.
Greetings, Mayor, councillors, and Mr. Conforti. Thank you very much for all of this work. I know this is this has been a very challenging budget, and I know that it won't be the last challenging budget, given all that we're looking at with infrastructure and climate change, which is one of my areas. So this is not a complaint at all. I just wondered about the list of efficiencies other than windrows. If it's something that you can speak to, I would just be interested. It might give us some ideas.
Yeah, I'm happy to start the list, and so I will preface it by saying we really did take a lens this year as we built the budget to preserve and maintain service levels. Windrows is an example where a reduction is brought forward, but it really is the only significant change in service levels that are included in the budget. What we tried to do instead was, where are we able to find reductions, offsets, efficiencies in a way where we could achieve a reduction in cost or an added revenue without impacting how the service that's delivered. And when I speak to that 620 million in reductions and offsets that we've identified, outside of really windrows, that was the goal of that. And if we look at that list, Councillor Carroll had mentioned it. We do a line-by-line review with each of our programs and our agencies, and through that work, and we'll look at every category of expense in the operating budget, starting from salaries and benefits, materials and supplies, equipment, just going down our list of expenditures. We identified $180 million through that line-by-line work across all of our programs and agencies. Then in addition to that, we do something that we call our program and agency review. That is, when the submissions come in, we'll work with our programs, we'll look at what they're asking for, we'll look at the timing of when things need to be spent or we think will be spent, or we look at certain initiatives and see if there's alternative ways or costs to deliver that program. We identified 200 million through those actions. The other one, and this is really a testament to our programs and our agencies, when we started this budget, we said the pandemic is over. We cannot continue to budget for COVID costs and expect COVID funding to come from the federal or provincial government. We knew there were sustained impacts in transit and in shelters, and we were going to make sure that this year's budget transitioned those to the property tax base. But all of our other programs, we had asked them, if you need to maintain that service or that expense, and there's some really good examples. Long-term care is a great example where they had to maintain that expense. We worked with them and ensured that they could accommodate it in their budget. And in other areas, we would have conversations around, do you still need to offer that level of service in the post-pandemic? And we might eliminate some of the extras that they were doing during the pandemic. Those actions alone were 112 million in savings and offsets. User fees, we do inflationary user fee increases. We do a review of volume estimations on the user fee services that we have. We found about $50 million there. What's important to note, we didn't increase fares. So while I talk about user fees and the general user fees, we made a point, especially as we're trying to bring ridership back to transit, we kept our fares. In addition to that, we had actions approved as part of the long-term financial plan. We identified $30 million this year, with the most significant being the graduated land transfer tax for high-value properties. The key to those actions is we actually expect even more offsets to be generated in 2025 and 2026. So we're modeling out what we think we can increase and grow, and that's going to be other work that our staff continues to do consistent with council direction. Service reductions, it's really three and really one only major one. The windrow clearing is the major reduction. There were some reductions in economic development that happened last year as it relates to international funding, info-to-go stations, and marketing. They had asked if they could bring those back in the budget this year, and we asked them to keep them out for one more year. So we are categorizing that as a reduction, even though it wasn't in the 2023 budget either. And public health offers a food handling program. What we found is there's actually a program offered by the private sector that most of our stakeholders use, and they leverage that. So we were able to back out of that service and direct people to use that other service, which was actually, I believe, even cheaper than what we would have offered it at. So that's a small $100,000 reduction, but that's really the only true service reductions versus all of those other actions that we took to generate the 620 million.
And if I can just jump in quickly, Stevens, just to let everybody know, as I was appointed by Mayor Chow as the chair of our general government committee, and it looks after all of the city's inside services, we pre-COVID, we've been undergoing an office modernization program where we've been looking at flexible workspace, optimizing the workspace that we do have in the downtown core. And, we've reduced the number of office leases that we used in the downtown. We've moved out of 9 buildings since 2019, creating flexible workspace. We have workspace in the one wing of Union Station right now. Internally, we're also looking at enhancing services by making use of technology. So you don't have to line up at one of the civic centers or go to the bank to pay your bills. You can do it online through a platform referred to as Pay It. So, we're really looking at efficiencies, and this is ongoing. It's not something that we just do at budget time. As I always like to say, maximizing the value of your tax dollars that you pay, because myself and Councillor Carroll, we and Mayor Chow, we all live in the city. We pay our property taxes, and we want to make sure we get the best bang for our buck as well. And we're right at the forefront of making sure that happens. Next, I have Alex. Is it Chrisanne?
Yep.
You can unmute Chrisanne.
Yep.
Hi, I just wanted to ask about the Scarborough Busway and if there was any progress on that, and if there was any money allocated in this budget towards that. I know the RT derailed in, I think, July. My timing could be off, but I know construction was supposed to start, I think, in November on the busway, and I don't think there's been any progress since then. So I'd really love an update, and that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so really that's a provincial ask. So, unfortunately, the Scarborough SRT outlived its life expectancy of the Band-Aids and elastic bands we were holding it together with. So we're looking at a dedicated busway on the right of what's called the route that the SRT was on, or the right of way. So we're asking the province for money to finance that, because the Scarborough subway extension is a provincial project. So right now we're running TTC buses on a dedicated loop to get people moving until we have that funding to start building the dedicated bus line, which I hope we'll have that funding sooner rather than later. and we'll get it built as quickly as possible. Next, we have Chris Churchill. Chris?
Paul,
hosting this is
Councillor.
Sorry, Mayor Chow.
Yep.
Yeah, Councillor Ainslie, I'm just wondering whether I could jump in here.
Sure.
And just a little bit of update to the question that was just asked. The TTC board passed a motion to push the province to fund the Scarborough RT busway so that you can save 20 minutes each day rather than being stuck in traffic on the bus. They have not said yes, they have not said no. And there's a letter that's going to be released by the TTC board, and so we're going to give it one last try. But I do want to tell you, though, that we have started the design. We will find money one way or another to make sure that the busway will be built, whether it's from the provincial government or the city dollars. We will make sure that you can save that 20 minutes because we feel that Scarborough residents have been left behind for too long in terms of the public transit and TTC services, which is why you now have a TTC chair, Jamel Myers, that live in Scarborough, use the TTC all the time, and understand the needs. So I've told him that we will seek money, whether it's from the province or from the city. So one way or another, we're going to get it built. And Councillor Ainslie, may I take a few minutes to just say thank you for folks? Or
Yes.
do you want to take a few more questions?
No, go right ahead, Mayor Chow.
Okay. I just want to thank all of you that took the time to, and taking the time to participate. I loved it when people said, "Oh, this is so transparent, and we're getting the information," and the excitement that I'm hearing in your voice, saying that, "Yeah, this is great. Let's participate." And I also heard that that there is a lot of anxiety about cutting the windrows, and I hear you. The windrow clearing. That snow, especially, I'm not young, so I know how hard it is to shuffle those driveways. So I valued very much your input, and I know that Councillor Ainslie and I will work closely together to find a way to protect it. And this is what these consultations are for, so we can hear what matters to you most, so that we can protect the services, enhance them. Those that we can do less of, we will do so. And I've heard that you think that 16% is way too much. I get it. I inherited this financial mess. And it is difficult. I didn't create it. As you probably heard earlier on, that we are 1.8 billion in the shortfall. But by working together, by getting the New Deal, by pushing in every levels, we are close. We are trying to put the city back on track. We're going to fix this mess, and together with you, so that we could build a affordable and safe and with faster transit, with better services. So I'm excited that we can do it. I need your help, though, because unless we get that funds from the federal government, we are in trouble. And we don't want to put that extra 6% because that's way too high. And but what do we do? Do we close all the shelters? Do we close the hotels? Do we put all the people out on the street? We now have 11,000 homeless people, and almost half of them are refugees. So we need the federal government to step up. And if you so happen to know your member of parliament, give them a call and say, hey, join in, step up, deliver, help us out, and let's partner together. And I know, and I will continue to listen to your questions, your response, and it is so important. Timing-wise, I'm doing this, there are 3 telephone town halls next week. If you want even more information, or if you have some neighbors, some friends that have suggestions, join us in the, I will be at all of them, the telephone town halls. Join us so that we can continue this dialogue. But I just want to thank you, because this is really precious that we can open up City Hall and you can participate and tell us what we are doing right or wrong. And your ideas and suggestions is incredibly valuable. So, and Councillor Ainslie, thank you for being such a responsive councillor. And let's work together.
Thank you, Mayor Chow, and I really appreciate your time joining us this evening. I know everybody very much appreciates it. Next on the list, Alex, I think we had Chris Churchill.
Hi, thanks, Paul. Thanks to everyone for hosting this, and to Stephen for a great presentation. Since windrows have come up an awful lot in this session, I just wanted to say that I would be quite happy if they disappeared, because at best I think they do a mediocre job of clearing, and at worst they do a lot of property damage, or at least on the street that I live on. Question to Stephen regarding the subject of the hotel taxes came up, but so one question is Airbnbs and Verbos, are they taxed? And if they are, can we increase the tax? And the other comment I want to make is, do we have any idea whether other cities, whether it's Vancouver, Montreal, Ottawa, Calgary, are in such dire straits as Toronto is? Because if everyone is in the same boat, we're all going to be asking Ottawa for more money, and the chances of getting that money are certainly going to go down and down and down. And if they do decide to give it to us, they'll just raise their taxes.
So maybe I can start on the Airbnbs, and then maybe I'm sure I can turn it to Councillor Carroll, who might want to talk about the other one. So in short, if you are eligible for short-term rental in the city, you are subject to the municipal accommodation tax. And the reason I say if you're eligible, Airbnb is, I had asked specifically about Verbo myself. They actually are not able to run in the city. So there's some differences in terms of which ones have that ability and have an agreement in the city. But if you do, you are subject to the municipal accommodation tax. And I'll pass it off to our budget chair.
Yeah, we're working on that. You know, short-term rental is part of that gig economy that we're forever chasing to catch up with whatever their innovations are. But we're working to make sure that we accountably make them a part of the municipal accommodation tax. That's only fair to the hoteliers. And it's really important for our tourism industry, because you need to know that where that accommodation tax goes doesn't really balance the city's budget, because what that does is most of those funds go to destination to Toronto. We keep a little bit, but most go to our arm's length organization. And that's really crucial to building back some of the things that really make the downtown thrive. Attracting conference business and tourism investment from outside the city is really their job, and they're experts in that field. But I really thank you for the question about other municipalities. Paul actually has been one of the Federation of Canadian Municipality Representatives. There's a problem now, but there has been a problem that they've long been advocating, that we need a better deal for all cities at the end of the day. What you're seeing is all municipalities needing to get beyond the financial challenges of the pandemic. And so Vancouver last year did a 10% property tax increase. While they don't often announce them together. If you look at both tiers of the tax increase of GTA municipalities that surround us, they're all doing fairly high property tax increases. But more importantly, Chris, part of the challenge that we face in Toronto is that there have been times since the big governance changes and amalgamation and the creation of the regional governments, we went through periods of time where we were doing 0% property tax increases, slightly below inflation property tax increases. And to meet the new challenges post Municipal Act changes and post amalgamation of the regions, elsewhere in the GTA, we were doing sometimes 2 and 3% property tax increases while they were doing combined increases of 8.5, 9, because they needed to get up to the new government that they were delivering. And we didn't take those measures back in those times. I would love if we had done it during better economic times. But by not doing it, we just got closer and closer to the brink, and COVID just sped up our journey to the brink. And that's why we find ourselves making a lot of tough choices right now and having to serve several crises at the same time. And so we're having to do this. But you'll notice that when we launched the budget yesterday, if you comb through the papers, you'll find the Federation of Canadian Municipalities came out at the same time on social media saying, yeah, all cities need a good hard look at how they are going to sustain themselves into the future in Canada. And we need our other government partners to come to the table and talk about that. But here's the good news. In that working group that the mayor negotiated with Premier Doug Ford, by the end of that process, and it's bad news for Stephen, but good news for all the rest of us, because what the Premier said was, here's the new deal, but we're not done. This is for now. We're going to do the highway upload, and here's some funding for the next 3 years. But that working group is going to continue because he fully acknowledged that he sees the need to look at those tools that we've recommended in Toronto's long-term financial plan. And he even acknowledged that perhaps I need them for the whole GTHA, but let's get through this year and then go back to the table. So that talk about how all the cities could be doing better and not relying too much on your property tax, because your property tax isn't based on your wealth. Your income is, and we have no access to income. I'll close, Paul. This could be my closing remark for the night. We really need you to help us advocate for this when you're talking to your MP and your MPPs. You know, I used the analogy during the long-term financial plan. Taylor Swift is going to come to this town for 6 days to do shows, and you will see our tourism economy blow up because people are coming from as far away as Calgary to bring their little girls to see that show. So the whole family will come and take rooms. We'll go to restaurants. We'll buy the tickets to go to the venue, and there'll be a whole frenzy downtown. The province and the feds will see a huge bump up in their economy. That's already happening everywhere her tour goes. The City of Toronto will provide additional police, additional ambulances, and we will not see one thin dime from that economic bump up. We need access to a tool that can take advantage whenever the economy recovers. And then we will not always be coming back to you with property tax woes. Yeah.
Thank you, Shelley. I want to, and seeing we're at 9 o'clock, Mayor Chow, did you want to say anything in conclusion? You're okay?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. And Councillor Ainslie, thank you for organizing this. And it's really quite amazing. I finally figured out how to get in visually, but I was on the phone. I was listening.
Well, Mayor, thank you very much for taking time to be here. I know my residents really appreciate you being here and listening to their comments and their thoughts and concerns around the budget. It's very much appreciated. And I want to thank Shelley for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you'll be looking forward to the tail end of Valentine's Day when you can catch your breath, but starting on the 2025 budget, probably the very next day. Stephen, thank you for all of your hard work and dedication, and once again coming out to the Scarborough Guildwood Budget Town Hall as you've done many years previously. I want to thank all of the residents for coming out this evening. For those of you that didn't have your questions asked, if you could email them to my office and we can get a response for you. For those of you that wrote them, submitted a written one, my staff are copying those as well to make sure you could get answers to your questions. I'd just like to remind everybody as well, as we've said a number of times in the evening, we're just at the beginning of the budget process. In-person or virtual consultations are still taking place. Monday, January 22nd at the Scarborough Civic Center from 1:30 in the afternoon to 4:30. And then there's going to be an evening session from 6:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. And if you need to speak at either one of those sessions, you need to register. There is a link in the comments section, or please reach out to my constituency office and we can help you with the registration as well. And I want to thank everybody for having a great night. And I hope everybody has a healthy, happy, safe new year in 2024. And we'll talk with everybody soon. Take care and have a great night. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. You have a great councillor.
Totally agree.